भोजन के बाद स्वागत करना बहुत ही आवश्यक है और वो भी जिस तरह से भोजन हमने खाया और भी ये इम्पोर्टेंट बन जाता है कि लोगों को वापस बुलाया जाए। और इसलिए मैंने ये माइक पहना क्योंकि मैं थोड़ी आई शुड स्पीक विद अ लाउडर वॉइस सो दैट पीपल डोंट गो टू स्लीप। सो प्लीज कीप लुकिंग एट योर नेबर। बाई चांस इफ योर नेबर गोज टू स्लीप, प्लीज वेक हिम अप और हर अप। And that's the connection between domestic policy and foreign policy. See, domestically, please remain awake, and in foreign policy, keep your neighbor awake. That will be a commitment I'm requesting from everybody who is here. Now, I have another thing I did to keep a PowerPoint presentation. At least that will be little colorful, so you can keep looking at that. Even though Manoj sir is very colorful on the stage, I may not be so colorful. But that is something you can watch and look at. Now, the topic which SES and the CMDR gave me, and I'm thankful to both of them for calling me here. The topic they gave me is to look at the foreign policy of India in the last decade and its role in economic growth. As a teacher, we generally try to use catchy words and catchy phrases so that people remember what you said. And I have been teaching now for the last 43 years. And in 43 years, more than 25,000 students have allowed me to learn with them in their class. I don't think I have taught anybody, but these 25,000 boys and girls have allowed me to learn with them. So what I am sharing with you is what I have learned with all of them. If I have to look at foreign policy, economic growth, and 10 years of what I would call the transformation of Bharat, I would use 3 A's to describe it. And the 3 A's are attitude, aspiration, and approach. If things have changed, 3 things have changed. Attitudes have changed, aspirations have changed, and approach has changed. Now, because we are talking of Bharat, I would like to use an Indian language also and not just talk about A. I would use 3 terms in Hindi, which also could be, I think, used in Kannada. And those 3 terms for me form the acronym DAM. Aaj Bharat mein dam hai. And what is that dam? The da of that dam, I believe, is drishtikon, which is what I said, the attitude. The of dam is akanksha, our aspiration. And the ma of that dam for me is marg, or the approach. Now, those 3 words are going to be a focus of what I'm going to talk about. The prism from which I will look at foreign policy is economic growth. The lens from which I will look at foreign policy is the whole process of globalization that you see around. If I were to take this dialogue forward and give you a broad outline of how I'm going to discuss things, and Manoj, please tell me when half an hour is over, because I don't want to speak for more than half an hour. I want more time for questions and answers. So I would limit myself to half an hour. I would do it in 5 perspectives. Firstly, provide the wider context. And what is that wider context? When I was preparing for this session, I saw a very famous statement from the Bhagavad Gita, advice which Lord Krishna gave Arjuna. And the advice is very interesting. He said, whatever happened was good. Whatever is happening is also good. And whatever will happen in the future will also be good. For me, the transformation of Bharat is about the past, is about the present, is about the future. If I were to use the same quote from Lord Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. So that for me is the wider context. the connection between diplomacy and economics and economy. Now, I am a survey researcher. All my research is on trying to find out what people feel. So what is popular perception of foreign policy? Last month we released a report on how do people look at foreign policy. I will share some findings from that, and then look at the last decade, and then come to certain concluding final observations. Let me start off with what I would see as 4 important statements. I'm not going to read the statements because you can read them and understand them because it's in very simple language. Prime Minister Modi, whose statement I have quoted, made this very important point, that today on the world stage, India dialogues with other countries as equals. There is no high or low. We dialogue with everyone as equals. If you look at what our Foreign Minister Jaishankar ji said, he said, if you look at the global pecking order today, if you look at the way countries are considered important or not important, he says, India is today visible. There is no question of doubt, he says, that India is visible. And India is visible because India is alive to the challenges that face contemporary nations. So I think there are 2 important points in what Jaishankar says. And finally, our Defense Minister Rajnath Singh made an important statement some time back. He said, today the voice of India is heard. The voice of India is taken more seriously across the world. I just did not want to quote Indian leaders. If you look at the Pew Research Center, a study which an American research center did, they also concluded as part of their study that India is the 4th most visible nation with a global standing. We may disagree with their ranking. They put China at first. 48% of their respondents said China, and you could name multiple countries. The second they put was Russia at 41%. The third was the United States at 32%, and the 4th was India at 28%. Now, we may debate whether it is 4, 3, 2, 1, but the fact that India is in that top 4, recognized even by a leading research, a survey agency in the West, is for me an important indication. Now, if I were to take the dialogue forward, what is the wider context that I'd like to use? I go back to my first point. I am looking at a view from the ground. I'm not looking at a top-down approach, I'm looking at a bottom-up approach. How do people in India, I was about to say common people, I have stopped using the word common people because people are the most uncommon. The common, I think the word common to describe the typical Indian is not doing credit to the Indian because the Indian is not common, very, very unusual. Now, when I say popular perception, I am asking for this view from the ground. When I say capturing the mood in the last decade, I am basically looking at the image of India, the reality of India, and I often heard, when I first traveled abroad as a teacher in 1992, I often heard this question, does India has a future? It was asked as a question mark. India has a future? 2 weeks back, I was in Australia, and there again I heard the same sentence, India has a future. This time it was not a question mark, it was an exclamation mark. In 1990s, you asked the same sentence, India has a future. Today you ask the same sentence, but now you say, India has a future. Now, that for me is the mood in the last decade. If I were to take my last 2 points, the importance of foreign policy, the new leveraging of Indians who live abroad to bolster India's image, something which was not done too much in the past, trying to use the presence of people of Indian origin abroad to be able to enhance India's reputation and presence across the world. And as people have been saying since morning, the fact of cultural diplomacy and cultural factors to boost India's image. And my last point on this particular slide, I think the content of our foreign policy is defined by the context of the situation India's foreign policy is carried forward in. Think about this. We have monarchian multinational companies. I felt so proud when I was in Australia and an Australian told me, I am working for an Indian company. I didn't get to hear that too much in the 1990s. But now it's very common. Somebody tells you abroad that I work for Infosys, I work for Wipro, I work for Tatas, I work for Reliance, I work for Adani's, I work for Birla. So the presence of Indian multinationals today also, I think, has an important role to play in the change that we are now seeing. Let me come to the crux of what I want to talk about, the relationship between diplomacy and the economy. I go to my first point. If anything has happened in the last 10 years, it is this visible shift, what I would call a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift in the last 10 years. And what is this paradigm shift? Earlier to 2014, diplomacy was about politics. After 2014, diplomacy is about economy and culture. Prime Minister himself said that our focus on foreign policy and diplomacy is on economy and culture. What are the signs of that? The whole focus on Bharat First is an example of that. Secondly, when I went to provide some inputs for those entering the civil services, the people entering the foreign service told me, we are being given special training on economy and on culture so that we can represent the country effectively abroad in these two domains also. Recently, a foreign service officer told me every foreign service officer has to adopt a state. And when he or she is abroad as a representative, they focus particularly on that state, even as they focus on other states, very clearly indicating this focus on culture and on economics. We have been discussing the second point a lot since morning, that does our foreign policy recognize the demographic dividend? A lot of data has been thrown around on this, not just today, but you would have heard it in the past. Let me share 1, 2, 3, 4 data points with you. Data point number 1. The average age of an Indian today is 28.8 years. So we are a young society in an old cultural setting. 28.8. And many countries across the world are envious of India because of our median age, which is 28.8. By 2050, this median age will go up to 39. The average age of Indians will be 39 by 2050. Third data point. This was mentioned by Mr. Ajit Doval recently. He said by 2050, 40% of the global workforce will be from India. Imagine. 40% of the global workforce will be of Indian origin. 4 out of every 10 people in the workforce will be from our country. By 2050, 1 billion Indians will be in the working age. But this raises a question. Manoj sir, in 2025, are we preparing ourselves for 2050? That question. Are we preparing us for this data of 2050? This is one of the imperatives of the national education policy, of how we transform our education. What Prime Minister Modi said, can we move from what to learn to how to learn? So that once our young people know how to learn, even without us they can learn. Now, because of what to learn, they need to keep coming back to us to ask us, what do I learn? That's why a boy in the Viva in his placement interview said, sir, in a placement interview a boy said, don't ask me that question because ma'am did not teach this in the classroom. Can we afford to have that approach? Last month, I was very embarrassed on my campus. We had a foreign scholar come and talk about what it is to study in an American university. And one of my students asked a very mischievous question. My student stood up and asked, sir, is attendance compulsory in your country? I knew where that question is coming from. I knew where that question is coming from. That man stood up and said, young man, let me tell you, I also did my undergraduate in India. So I know why you are asking that question. And then he went on to say, sir, he said, in my class, attendance is not compulsory. Everybody clapped. He said, wait, before clapping, let me see how loud will be your clap after the next 2 points I make. Next point. I tell my students, don't come for class, no problem, but then don't tell me that my question paper was difficult. Because my question paper is based on what I taught you in the class. Don't tell me the assignment was tough, because you will not find the answer to any assignment in any chat GPT or in any book. It is based upon what we discussed in the class. If you are okay with both these, you don't need to come to my class at all. After that, I have been asking wherever I meet teachers this question. Are we confident of both those answers in our classrooms? Can I confidently tell my student that don't come for my class, no problem. The fellow will say, no problem, sir, I have all the notes that you gave last year also. Or does the student feel I really have missed something, and even if I read 10 books, I will not get that? Manoj sir, for me, that is the challenge in preparing for the generation which will work from 2030 onwards. Yes, these numbers are there. We decide whether it will become a demographic dividend or whether it will become a demographic disaster. We decide. An important component in that is the digital dividend which is coming in now. How well placed are we in terms of our digital knowledge? Morning there was talk of chat GPT. I think there is nothing wrong in chat GPT coming in the classroom. I have often told my students, open your laptops, open your chat GPT in your mobile. Here is a question. Tell me what chat GPT says. We will make that the basis for the discussion in the class. I once gave question paper to students in the exam. Here is what chat GPT told as an answer. Tell me what is wrong with this answer. Tell me where this answer is wrong. What do you need to add? And then students are telling me, sir, you also go to ChatGPT. I also go to ChatGPT. Therefore, see the mistakes in what ChatGPT has done. Can I avoid technology from becoming a threat to me and make technology my assistant? Can I make technology my assistant? That is the challenge I have today in preparing our generation for the next 2 decades and taking our country forward. The last point on this slide, Bharat on the global stage. There is no question of doubt on this. In the last 10 years, when I have walked down roads of foreign universities, invariably I find the names of Indian professors. When I walk down the streets, I find Indian terms, Indian cultural references, and special programs, evening yoga class, morning meditation class, across university campus. When I was as part of a Indian delegation to Australia recently, they told us, we have 6 lakh foreign students, the biggest from India. And we are very proud that they are studying here. Every third teacher who met us as a representative of an Australian university was somebody of Indian origin. And they were constantly telling us, here is the opportunity for bringing in what is authentically Indian. Here is the opportunity to bring in what the national education policy talks about, internationalization at home. If you read the NEP, these 3 words are used, internationalization at home. Are we here only to send our graduates abroad? Do we create programs also which make foreign graduates come and study in our universities? Internationalization at home. Is that and this is something our foreign policy makers and implementers are trying to pursue. In Australia, the High Commissioner told us in a discussion, I'm not wanting to only look at Indian students coming to Australia. I'm looking at Australian students coming to India. And you universities have to take that initiative forward. So today, diplomacy is not just about our students studying abroad. It's also about bringing those students to India and getting them to work here. Let me move to my penultimate slide. Manojji, do I have at least 5 to 6 minutes more? Yes? Okay. Now, when I view our foreign policy, here are 4 points I would make. Leadership has always been important in Indian foreign policy. Be it during the time of Jawaharlal Nehru, be it during the time of Indira Gandhi, be it during the time of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. What has changed in the last 10 years, I think, is the projection of that leadership. How that leadership has positioned itself and how we have projected that leadership, I think that has been a huge difference. Also, the effort to try and link the domestic compulsions to our foreign policy are very, very clearly there. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Okay, let me discuss that here itself when I talk about the aspirations of a young India. In a study that we recently did when we asked young people who wanted to go abroad, other than for tourism, why do you want to go abroad? It was so heartening to note that 1/4 of them said, we want to study abroad, but come back and work in India. Another 1/4 said, we want to study abroad, come back to India and start our business here because the opportunities back home are much better. There were, of course, 30% of them who said, I want to study abroad and work abroad. But remember, those numbers are today less than the numbers of those who want to study abroad but come back to India. Who are the ones who want to come back to India? Lower middle class and middle. The well-to-do, very interestingly, don't want to come back to India. But the lower middle class and the middle class and the boys and girls from small towns and cities are the ones who wish to take the benefit of studying abroad and then return to India and work in India. They, of course, have a rider. We hope that all that is being promised today as will be done in India. If that happens, we are coming back. So they have put the onus back on policymakers. are you creating the environment that will facilitate the return of people to the country? Now, let me just share 4 data points about how people in India look at foreign policy. Here was a question. Do you think on infrastructure and technology, advanced countries are ahead of India or behind India? 70% said on technology they are ahead of India, and around 16% said it is the same, but very few said we are ahead of the West. When it came to quality of life, also 2/3 said the West is ahead of India. Around 20%, which is 1/5, said it is more or less the same, which is a 4-fold increase compared to 10 years ago. 10 years ago, only 5% said that. Today, 21% said that. But the most heartening is the last one. In terms of cultural strengths, 42% said India is ahead of the rest of the world. And to take that point forward, we asked another question. Is there an age difference? Do younger people also feel that our cultural strengths, we are much better? Please notice, there is not much difference between different age groups. Younger generation, 43% feel we are ahead. Older generation also, 43% feel we are much ahead. It's not that younger people think differently from older people. Both have a similar way of looking at it. Let me take it to my second last slide. When we ask this question on economic self-reliance, should we limit exports to strengthen the domestic market, or should we improve our exports so that Bharat's global image improves? It was more or less equally divided, Deepakji. 51% saying we should limit exports to strengthen our domestic market, whereas 49% said exports should help in promoting Bharat's global image. So the jury is still out on this question. People are still debating this. And I come to my last data point. Opinion on prioritizing global image or domestic challenges. Overall, 69% said we need to get things okay at home first and then talk about getting things better abroad. There is a slight mistake there. It should be 41 and 59, not 69. Because the economist will immediately tell me my numbers don't add up. It comes to 110. So it is 41 and 59, that's a mistake. Yeah, it is 59. I read it wrong, it is 59. Am I right? It's coming below 60, so it's 59. If you look at the richer sections of society, the gap is much closer, 48 to 52. If you look at the poor, look at the huge gap, 36 to 64. So that explains why I think the current government pays so much of emphasis to the poorer segments of society and the need to work there. This is my last slide. In this last slide, I'm going back to 3 questions. The demographic dividend. I think for me, I go back to my A's, which I started off with. Demographic dividend is about our approach. I used the word approach in the beginning, the marga. The approach is defined in our demographic dividend. I'm going to add another A in demographic dividend, which I didn't add in the beginning, which is anxiety. This is a factor of anxiety also. Will demographic dividend be demographic dividend, or will it be a demographic disaster? Keeping in mind the various factors I mentioned. And then you have an emerging aspirational Bharat. My second A, aspiration. There is an aspirational Bharat. A younger generation which has hopes. A younger generation which has expectations. A younger generation which believes certain things need to be done. Can we meet that? And a term which we have used so much nowadays, will Bharat emerge, or is Bharat emerging as the Vishwaguru? For me, the third A is important here, attitude. the attitude. And this debate came in the morning also. Atmanirbhar Bharat. Is Atmanirbhar Bharat about technology, about wealth alone? Is Atmanirbhar Bharat about self-reliance alone? Or friends, let me ask a very uncomfortable question. Is Atmanirbhar Bharat about the emancipation of the mind? Is Atmanirbhar Bharat about emancipating the way I think? That for me is a critical requirement that we take forward. Again, I began with a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to end with a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna once again says, Arjuna, at a critical moment in the discourse, happiness is a state of mind. He tells Arjuna, happiness is a state of mind. Atmanirbhar Bharat is a state of mind. It's how we as people, we as citizens, we as members of a family, we as a community, we as a part of a job, look at how we do what we do. It is about a state of mind. So for me, the focal point of Atmanirbhar Bharat should be self-reliance in production, self-reliance in various fields, but most important for me, it is about a self-reliant mind, an emancipated mind, which thinks from Indian idioms and does not constantly use Western paradigms to define and decide what they believe. Thank you for, I did not hear a single snore in the last half an hour, and I do hope everybody kept awake. And the proof of that is the number of questions you asked, whether you are actually awake or not. And I'm challenging your self-reliance now. How emancipated is your mind? Are you really going to ask questions, or are we just going to sit back and say, let's wait for the tea break to have our tea? Now, this is one of our challenges, Dharaniman. All our sessions are defined as pre-tea, post-tea, pre-lunch, post-lunch. You see, the food is the more important part of the session. So now, Deepak sir, will you speak? Manoj sir, will you speak first, or do we go for questions first? We'll go for questions first. Okay. Yes, sir.
Some 20 years back, by quoting the External Affairs Minister, Shankar's, as well as the Defense Minister, and your personal experience, really, yes, there is. Yes, there is. We are no way. We are from no way to we are equal to everybody. This is what exactly your presentation. I am really thankful to you. It's a very enlightening lecture for us. So now the session is open for questions. I invite, as Sir has said, that if you are really awake without sleep, that you will expect more questions. Therefore, I also expect same as the case. So please, the forum is open.
Thank you, sir, to listen to another best talk. Really glad to listen once again. Congratulations for that. I'm equally proud, as Professor Brahmanand said, that India is sitting across major nations of the world in terms when it comes to issue the global problems. They are looking at India, even they are listening at India, though it is not related to India. So that is really great to see. So my question is relating to the relationship between foreign policy and economics. It was believed earlier, sir, that the economic integration between the nation through trade and investment will improve the political relationship between the country. As economic integration go into more deeper and deeper, the relationship between the nation will improve and conflict will be reduced and global prosperity will be expected. But if you look at the recent years, the political relationship which are mooted by, as you have said in the beginning, the leader of that, that the country sometimes will be the architecture of the foreign policy. And surprisingly, even afraiding that sometimes foreign policy, generally you expect foreign policy will be stable for at least a decade or half a decade. Sometimes the foreign policy are getting changed in a very short period. Such kind of development in the world, they are, they are afraid in the sense they are, disintegrating country of the world. I'm talking about economic integration. Take for example, recent USA-China political relations, how it has, of course, there are other things to say. So what I'm saying is, when a ship is moving through full of load, when you put sudden a brake, you just imagine he's going for some business or something else. How to come back and how to go forward. See, these are the things which are making us to think, if such kind of political relations or policy are disintegrating country of the world in terms of talking about economic, through trade and investment. So what are your views on this, sir?
Dividend for its foreign policy priorities, and how as a policy maker you are going to balance this. Thank you.
ಯಾರಿಗಾದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಕೇಳಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹೆಸರು ಸರ್?
Myself, Maltesh Aralikatti.
Okay, let me take, sir, if you look at the economy, and I'm drawing inspiration back from Chanakya's Arthashastra. I always have a fight with economists that Arthashastra is not economics, but Arthashastra is actually politics. Because Artha means, if you look at what Chanakya wrote, Artha means Prapanchika, a science of knowledge which was based on materialism. Until then you had all Dharma Shastras. This was the first Arthashastra. So a science of knowledge which is not based on Dharma, but based on materialism, but that debate we can have separately. You call me out to your department, we'll have a debate on that. But in the Arthashastra, Kautilya makes an important point. He says, he talks of what is called the Sapta Anga theory of the state. The 7 elements that make up the state. And nothing in Western philosophy talks about that. Because the 7th element he talks about, no Western philosopher talks about that. And what is that 7th element of a state? Chanakya says the 7th element of your state is your friend. Your other country who is your friend. Now think about it. Chanakya those days itself understood how a friend is an important element of the state. Otherwise all political theorists talk about territory, nation, people, power. Nobody talks about the neighbor or a friendly country. Kautilya says that friendly country strengthens your power. This friendly country increases your power. Why am I making this argument? Somewhere I feel in the last 10 years, the use of friends outside the country is being visibly seen in bolstering our foreign policy, especially the way the country has handled the Ukraine-Russia war. I think that's a clear indication of how you use developments across the world to be able to strengthen your interests and your position. To take your argument forward, last 10 years I have seen a neighborhood first policy, focusing on the neighborhood. All our SAARC neighbors have a boundary with India. Maldives has a maritime boundary with India. All the others share a boundary with India, and all the others don't share a boundary with each other. Remember that. All our neighbors share a boundary with us, and none of our neighbors share a boundary with each other. And I'm just going to take 4 examples. Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal, and the 4th country would be Bangladesh. In the last decade, we have had challenges with all the 4. But all the 4 have come back to us at the end of the day for support. I happened to be in Sri Lanka when the Chinese were close to them. And I happened to be in Sri Lanka after India gave them support. We could make out a visible difference in the way people looked at it. Now, the Bangladesh leader has sought a meeting with the Indian leadership to be able to build bridges. Same thing happened in Maldives. You said all Indian troops should go away, but then a time came when you said, no, India is our strategic partner. This has happened constantly with Nepal. So, leveraging our national interest and understanding that they have their own reasons to say and do what they are doing, but that will not impact the way we deal with them, I think is a way of pursuing foreign policy, keeping in mind ultimately your national interest. Which brings me to Pushpa's point. Again, because I am a student of politics, I also make this mistake. Were you meaning demographic dividend or democratic dividend? Democratic, okay. Now, yes, democracy is a great policy for home. It's not a good export. By which I mean, when you build relations with other countries, you don't ask the question whether it's a democracy or not a democracy. You accept their compulsions. You carry on your foreign policy, keeping in mind what that country brings to you as a nation, and you are not there to, you want democracy at home, now let them manage the policy they want in their country. This has been, though of course officially we say that we support the practice of democracy globally, but if you look at relations, it has never been on that terms. It's always been defined by what is in India's interests at the end of it. Now to Maltesia's question. Maybe the 21st century world is a world of soft power. And India anticipates the importance of soft power and believes that that soft power can be the way to be able to establish your credentials on the world stage. And we believe that soft power is a way by which we will be able to take Bharat forward in terms of the global stage. So yes, and if you read Mr. Jaishankar's speeches, he very often refers to this and talks about how soft power is the strength that India has. And what all I said about India and its neighbors is a categorical reflection of how soft power plays an important role in being able to take diplomacy forward. I still remember, I have had the chance of going to Pakistan only once. And that was soon after, imagine, soon after the 2014 elections. And the seminar was on India's elections and its impact on India-Pakistan relations. If that is not enough, my paper at that conference was on the leadership factor in the Indian elections. You see, 3 levels of complication for me. And of course, when I went there and we went around, very clearly the emerging soft power of India was a clear factor which was worrying them, not the people. I've often said people-to-people relationship is very different between the two countries. When it comes to the politics and the leadership question, there are challenges that come up. If I could just take an aside, not recently, can you switch off the camera for 1 minute? Switch off, okay. Around 10 years ago, when I was attending a conference in Australia, suddenly somebody came up to me and started talking in Hindi, and I also started talking to him in Hindi. And I thought this fellow must be from Punjab or Uttar Pradesh. And ultimately he lands up to be a Pakistani civil servant. So for half an hour we didn't talk to each other. And then after half an hour we said, we were again on the dining table. He's telling me ये पाकिस्तान में बनता है. I said, नहीं ये India में भी बनता है. I said, दोनों देशों में बनता है. So the conversation went on. And we became friends. Only condition we said is we are not going to talk about Kashmir. Everything else we will talk about. The Governor General threw a dinner for us. And a lot of protocol was there, so we were all standing in a line, and Governor General was being introduced to us. I was first, and he was next to me, the Pakistani civil servant. So Governor General was told, Sandeep Shastri from India. Then he went to him, and then he went forward. After going forward, he came back to us, the Governor General. I was wondering, why did he come back to us? He looked at both of us. He said, India, Pakistan standing next to each other, no problem? I smiled. What to tell them? I smiled. Our Pakistani friend got angry. He said, sir, India, Pakistan next to each other, no problem as long as you don't create a problem. As long as you don't create a problem. I thought that was a good example of soft power. Quietly he went away from that. He didn't continue the conversation. So yes, soft power is a very critical factor as we go forward. Sir, is there time for a second round of questions, or do we need to close the session? Of course.